I never imagined that a small pile of dog poop could turn a peaceful Sunday morning into a nightmare that almost cost me my life. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, imagining heavy footsteps on my porch and a cold gun pointed at me. My name is Gray, a 42-year-old software engineer, married to Jenny, a nurse at the hospital. We live in a small house in Westerville, Ohio that we bought 5 years ago. In early spring last year, Dave and Hannah, a married couple, moved into the house across from us. From the first week, I felt something was off with Dave. He was the kind of guy who liked to show off his muscles, always wearing a tank top to flaunt his gym-honed physique. But I never saw him do anything heavier than opening a beer bottle on his porch. Hannah, his wife, was thin and small, always bowed her head when she went outside, and often had bruises on her wrists. Shortly after moving in, Dave developed a habit of standing at his window, observing our yard, especially when I let Max out. That fateful Sunday morning, I went outside to breathe in the cool air. Everything was perfect for a day off. Max ran after me with excitement. When I wasn't paying attention, Max pooped right in Dave's front yard. I quickly rushed inside to grab a bag, hoping I could clean it up before he noticed. But less than 30 seconds after I bent down to clean, a furious banging echoed from Dave's house like thunder. I jumped. Dave appeared, his face red, neck veins bulging, muscles tense. "What the hell is this?" he screamed, his voice filled with hatred. I stood up, apologized softly, and held up the bag as evidence that I was cleaning, my hands slightly trembling. But Dave didn't listen to my full sentence. His eyes were bloodshot, as if I had just committed an egregious crime. I wasn't afraid of Dave, but I was afraid of the way he looked at Max, as if my dog was his sworn enemy. When he threatened, his voice cold as ice, "I'll shoot that dog if it dares to do that again." I clenched my fists when I heard him say that. There was genuine seriousness in his tone. "Dave, I understand you're upset, but I've already cleaned it up. I know that was just a joke, right?" Dave moved closer, his eyes lighting up with a sick pleasure. "What if it wasn't?" Dave reached out and shoved me so hard I almost fell. Anger flared inside me. A self-preservation reflex made me push back, and he staggered and fell. In that split second, I saw the surprise on his face turn into something far more terrifying. I knew I had made a huge mistake. "You'll regret this," he said, ominous voice, before turning and walking back into his house. I picked up Max and went home. I recounted the incident to my wife, my heart still pounding. Jenny advised me to call the police, but a part of me still hoped things would calm down. A few minutes later, the banging on the door echoed again, this time so violently it felt like he wanted to tear the door down. "Gray, get out here now!" It was Dave's voice. Jenny clutched my arm, urging me not to go outside, but I couldn't just hide in the house like a coward. When I opened the door, the world seemed to stop for a second. Dave stood there with a shotgun in his hand, his face contorted with hatred. "I'm not kidding." My mind went blank. I only managed to scream, "Jenny, get down!" before a deafening blast rang out. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air and my ears rang. Jenny screamed. I fell to the floor and quickly crawled inside. Dave yelled, "Next time, remember that." My hands trembled as I dialed 911, my voice breaking as I reported the incident. I reached Jenny, with Max by her side. I quickly hugged both of them tight. At that moment, I could only pray the police would arrive in time. Luckily, Dave didn't come into the house. He just stood outside the door, continuously yelling and cursing. The police arrived in 10 minutes. They took our statements and testimony from Mr. and Mrs. Henderson across the street about the gunshot. Dave was arrested on charges of armed assault. 3 days later, Hannah came over to apologize, her eyes swollen and clear bruises on her wrists. She explained that Dave had psychological problems and that she had tried to stop him but couldn't. They would be moving next week because they couldn't afford their house and needed to hire a lawyer for Dave. The family left the following Saturday. Dave was out on bail, awaiting his court date. Now, every Sunday morning when I go out to get the newspaper, I still feel a chill down my spine thinking about that terrifying moment. Max still runs after me, but I carefully keep him on a leash. The bullet mark on the doorframe has been repaired, but the sound of the gunshot still echoes in my mind. It's a reminder that even something as small as dog poop can change a life in an instant. I need to be calm and even yield to handle things cleverly. Some sounds just bring back the past, no matter how hard you try to forget. The sound I fear and am most haunted by is the chirping of cicadas. It reminds me of a horrifying summer 13 years ago. I was 12 then, living with my parents in a small town in the San Joaquin Valley, California. Summer days there were hot and quiet, with only the incessant chirping of cicadas echoing from the old eucalyptus trees. Next to our house lived Mrs. Morris. She was around 60, with thinning gray hair. She lived alone in a small house at the end of the street. At first, I didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Morris. She was just a quiet old neighbor I occasionally saw watering her garden in the early morning. But gradually I started noticing strange things. One night, I woke up thirsty. Through my bedroom window, I accidentally saw Mrs. Morris standing in the middle of her yard in the shadow of the moonlight. She was whispering something. No one else was around. A few other nights, the scene repeated. Mrs. Morris wandered in her yard with empty eyes, muttering sentences I couldn't clearly hear. Sometimes she would stop, her head tilted to one side, as if listening for someone to reply. Then she would nod and continue whispering. I was scared but didn't tell my parents, choosing instead to close my window tightly and draw the curtains forever. As time passed, I gradually forgot about her strange behavior. Mrs. Morris never seemed to do anything harmful anyway. Aside from the strange neighbor, life in my family's neighborhood was very peaceful. Our house was near a paved road that gently sloped downhill. Every afternoon, I would take my rollerblades to that slope to skate. It was my favorite part of the day. At the bottom of the slope, there was a large moss-green truck parked on the side of the road. The truck was old, its paint peeling in many places, and its bed covered with a dark blue tarp. I usually rollerbladed down to it and then back up, repeating until I was tired. That fateful afternoon, I decided to try rollerblading down the slope as fast as I could. My mom had warned me many times about going too fast, but I never listened. The asphalt was scorching hot under my rollerblade wheels. The warm wind blew through my hair as I sped down the hill. I felt free and exhilarated, until I saw a small dog run across the road right in front of me. I braked hard, losing my balance. Realizing I was about to fall, I could only squeeze my eyes shut and scream. I slowly opened my eyes, sitting up slowly in a daze. Then I was startled to realize I was underneath the truck. The smell of oil and rubber mixed together made the air incredibly suffocating. I gasped for breath, just needing to crawl out. But as I looked around, I was drawn to some white strands gently fluttering in the breeze. Long, soft strands, clinging to something stuck between the two rear wheels. Out of curiosity, I crawled closer. At first, I only saw a pale, round shape, thinking it was a ball or some toy. But when I looked closer, a pair of eyes staring straight back at me. Below them was a nose, one side completely mangled, a wide-open mouth with the tongue lolling out. My entire body froze, my mouth dry, scared but unable to tear my eyes away from that face. Then I realized, Mrs. Morris. Just then, as if hearing her name, Mrs. Morris's head tilted to one side. The creaking sound from her neck bones sent a shiver down my spine. Her body was wedged between the axle and the road, her floral dress torn, her limbs bent at unnatural angles. Blood had dried to a dark brown on the pavement. I screamed and crawled out from under the truck as fast as I could. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably when I got home, my heart pounding as if it would explode. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled as I burst into the house. Mrs. Morris ... My mom looked worried, seeing my panicked state. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "Under the truck. Mrs. Morris is under the truck," I cried, trying to explain. My dad ran outside. A few minutes later, he returned with a pale face and immediately called the police. The police arrived, cordoned off the scene, and removed Mrs. Morris's body. They asked for basic information and instructed everyone not to approach the area. A few days later, the investigation results were released in the local newspaper. According to the report, Mrs. Morris had been suffering from severe insomnia and depression for many years. Inside her home, police found many empty pill bottles and disorganized notes. The autopsy results showed an unusually high concentration of sleeping pills in her blood. The police concluded, on the night of the accident, Mrs. Morris was sleepless and wandering around in a dazed state. A neighbor's camera recorded Mrs. Morris wandering the night the accident happened. Police analyzed the camera footage and concluded that Mrs. Morris was very likely in a dazed state and lay down under Mr. James's car without realizing it. As for Mr. James, he testified that on the night of the accident, he received a complaint from a resident on the street about his car blocking part of a pathway. He went back to his car to move it forward a bit. While driving, he felt a slight bump, but he dismissed it, thinking it was just a rock or a branch. He was not prosecuted, as this was deemed a tragic accident with no signs of negligence. I never rollerbladed on that slope again. My family moved when I was 17. Mrs. Morris's house is still there, abandoned with boarded-up windows. And on hot summer nights, when I hear the cicadas chirping, I still remember the pungent smell of engine oil from under the truck. Most horrifyingly, every narrow gap makes me see Mrs. Morris's distorted face and long gray hair. Looking back now, I understand that those times I saw Mrs. Morris wandering at night and whispering to herself were signs of the psychological illness she was enduring. Perhaps she struggled with insomnia and loneliness for years, until it led to that tragic end. I quit smoking 3 months ago. 5 months ago, if anyone had told me I'd be able to kick a 2-pack-a-day habit overnight, I would have laughed them out of the room. But sometimes life has its own way of changing people. There are events that happen to you that leave you no choice but to change. My name is Jack, and I've been married to Kate for 4 years. After trying for a long time, we finally got some good news. We moved to California last March. Kate was 3 months pregnant at the time, and my smoking became a huge issue in our household. She couldn't stand the smell of cigarette smoke, even when I smoked in the backyard. I understood she was worried about our unborn child, but quitting smoking was genuinely hard for me. In the first few days, I still tried to smoke in the garage. Kate constantly complained, and I knew I had to find another solution. That's when I discovered my sanctuary. Right behind our house, through a small alley between 2 houses, there was a fairly large oak tree that created a secluded spot. This area belonged to a vacant lot between our house and the one next door. No one ever went there, and more importantly, it was far enough from the house that Kate wouldn't smell the smoke when I came back inside. I started going there every day. The neighbor who lived right next to that area was an old man named Ben. He was about 60 years old, living alone in a small house. I had never seen him talk to anyone, and the rare times we crossed paths, he always looked at me with clear annoyance. I just thought it was the personality of a lonely person and didn't pay much attention to it, until that day. I was standing under the oak tree, smoking. It was around 8 p.m. I heard footsteps and turned to see Ben staring at me. "What are you doing here?" His voice sounded angry. "I'm just smoking. I hate the smell of smoke." "It's getting into my house," Ben said. There was something in the way Ben looked at me. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Before I could finish, Ben suddenly stepped forward and snatched the cigarette from my hand. He threw it on the ground and stomped on it. I stood there, unable to react. Ben looked at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. He also mumbled something I couldn't quite hear. It sounded like it was about death. I went home feeling bewildered. Kate asked me what was wrong, but I didn't want to worry her. I just said I'd had an unfriendly encounter with a neighbor. A few days later, I decided to change locations, but there really wasn't any spot more ideal than under that oak tree. I thought Ben might have calmed down after a few days, and I'd be more careful not to bother him. I went back on a weekend evening. It was starting to look like rain. I didn't see Ben anywhere, and I felt relieved. A little while later, it started to drizzle. At first, it was just small drops, but it quickly turned into a heavy rain. I felt uncomfortable, but still didn't want to go home right away because I hadn't smoked enough. I lit a new cigarette, leaning close to the tree trunk to shield myself from the rain. A few minutes later, I finally gave up. I was soaked, from my hair to my shoulders, everything. Still had half a cigarette left, but whatever. As I turned back, I noticed something strange. Red stains on my shirt. I looked down at my hand. There was also a faint metallic smell. I didn't think much of it. I just wanted to wash off the cigarette smell and that uncomfortable damp feeling. The next morning, as I headed to work, I noticed police tape stretched around the tree area. There were a few police cars and an ambulance parked nearby. I pulled over and asked a curious bystander standing nearby what was going on. "Someone committed suicide on that tree," he said. "They might have died sometime last night." I was stunned, craning my neck to try and see deeper into the scene. "Do you know who it was?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just an old man named Ben," he replied. "Lives alone in that greenhouse over there." His answer hit me like a ton of bricks. Last night, I had been smoking right there. Those red stains on my clothes, the ones I dismissed as sap or fruit juice, and the body on that tree. It was Ben. I had been standing right underneath his body for a full 15 minutes without ever knowing. The realization made my stomach churn. For the next few days, I was plagued by haunting images and sleepless nights. Those red streaks and that metallic smell that night. Ben was right above my head. It was horrifying. On the 4th day after the incident, the local news officially reported Ben's death. His medical records were released, showing that Ben had suffered from severe depression since his wife died of lung cancer 3 years prior. The cause of his condition worsening was diagnosed as her having inhaled secondhand smoke from Ben for many years. After his wife passed away, Ben had stopped smoking and developed an intense obsession with cigarette smoke. In the final days before his suicide, Ben had called his doctor multiple times, saying he couldn't stand the smell of cigarette smoke. He claimed to see his deceased wife constantly appearing nearby, uttering words of resentment. Was it possible that my smoke was what caused Ben to constantly recall his wife's death? My smoking habit, something I considered harmless, had become the final nightmare in Ben's life. I haven't smoked once since that day. Every time I think about lighting a cigarette, the image of the red stains on my shirt, the metallic smell in the air, and Ben's desperate eyes flash vividly before me. I can't shake the feeling that my smoke pushed him over the edge. I quit smoking, not just for Kate or our unborn child, but also for Ben, the lonely neighbor I had never truly understood. The oak tree still stands there silently in the alley, but it's no longer a place I go to escape. Instead, it's a harsh reminder of what I unknowingly caused. I live each day hoping that my change can be a way to atone, however belatedly, for Ben and for myself. I'm Ava, and I'm 16. It all started about 6 months after my family moved to this quiet neighborhood. My parents picked this place because it was known for being safe, having good schools, and a friendly community. Our next-door neighbor was Mrs. Allen, a middle-aged widow who seemed really polite. Her son, Joey, was my age. At first, Joey seemed like a normal kid, maybe a bit quiet and shy, but always polite when we bumped into each other. He usually wore big hoodies no matter the weather, and I rarely saw him with friends. My parents always said Joey was a good kid whenever they saw him helping his mom with yard work or carrying groceries inside. I can't say exactly when things started to get weird. Maybe it was the glances that lasted a little too long when we saw each other in the school parking lot. Joey always seemed to show up at the grocery store, the library, or the movie theater at the same time as me. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence in a small town. I started to notice how Joey would change his schedule to walk to school at the same time as me. He always sat close enough to overhear my conversations in the cafeteria, His bedroom window always seemed to have a light on. Sometimes, I just felt like someone was watching me. My mom gently brushed off my concerns, saying, "You're at that age where everyone notices you. There's no need to overthink it." But I still felt uneasy, and that feeling wouldn't go away, which made me pretty stressed out. One night, my parents went to a company party and were coming home late, so I was home alone. Rain started to fall outside, and the wind was pretty strong. Around midnight, I finished my essay and decided to go to bed. The house was strangely quiet. I was so tired that I fell asleep right away. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I woke up. At first, there was nothing but the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall and the sound of rain outside. But then, I realized another sound, a very faint breathing. I opened my eyes wide, held my breath, and listened. And it was coming from under my bed. My body froze. A cold dread spread through me, from the top of my head to my toes. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Someone was under my bed. My heart hammered, and my brain frantically searched for a plan. I decided the best option was to keep pretending to be asleep while I figured out what to do. Trying my best to keep my breathing even, I let one hand drop naturally off the side of the bed, as if I was just rolling over in my sleep. And then, my fingers touched human hair. All pretense vanished. I shot upright and leaped out of bed, unable to stop the scream that ripped from my throat. At the same moment, a dark figure emerged from under the bed. It was Joey. He stood there in his familiar black hoodie, his eyes wide. In his hand was a knife. Time seemed to stand still for a few long seconds as we stared at each other. I grabbed my bedside lamp and hurled it straight at Joey. It missed him, but it created enough of a distraction for me to bolt for the door. I heard Joey stumble behind me, probably tripping over something in the dark. I ran downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear hurried footsteps chasing me. At the front door, I fumbled with the deadbolt, my trembling hands making the simple task difficult. Finally, the door swung open, and I ran to the nearest house with lights on, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' place down the street. I banged on the door frantically, yelling my name and begging for help. The door opened, and Mr. Jenkins' confused face appeared. I quickly explained everything, and Mr. Jenkins immediately called the police. My parents rushed home from their party. Police searched Mrs. Allen's house, and then, even more horrifying things were discovered. Joey hadn't just been watching me from afar. He had snuck into my room multiple times for months. His room was a chilling shrine dedicated to me. Hundreds of photos of me doing all sorts of activities were plastered all over the walls. In a journal, police found detailed entries about what Joey called observation nights. Nights when he hid under my bed and simply watched me sleep. He described the feeling of touching my hair, wrote about my scent, the sounds I made while sleeping, and times he rummaged through my belongings when I left the room. But the most terrifying part, the one that made even the police officers shiver, Joey had explicitly written, "Tonight will be different. Ava will be mine forever. We will always be together, in death." And he had brought the tools to carry out that plan. The knife I had seen, rope, duct tape, and a bottle of sleeping pills. During the interrogation, Joey confessed to all of it with a disturbing calmness. He said he had fallen in love with me the first day he saw me, that we belonged together, and if he couldn't have me, then no one could. He detailed how he broke into my house through a first-floor window I had forgotten to lock. More than a year after the incident, I still wake up every night, my heart pounding, imagining someone hiding under my bed. Joey is in a mental institution. My family moved to another city. But I know I'll never feel truly safe again.